Hi, everyone. I'm Lauren Walker, the Manager of Athlete Development here at USA Volleyball. And today I'm privileged to be joined by Spencer Wickens, who's here to share some of his knowledge on what it means to be going through the NTDP pipeline or the high performance pipeline into collegiate play and cycling back around to what it looks like on the coaching end. So Spencer, thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
If you don't know much about Spencer, Spencer played collegiately at Pepperdine University, and then he went on to serve as a volunteer assistant at the Nebraska Huskers.
Graduate assistant.
Graduate assistant.
Yes.
Thank you for correcting.
No, you're welcome.
And then now he is an assistant coach at Stanford University. And he has also served in our national team pipeline as a coach. So we get to go ahead and share some wisdom today about what your experience was like going through the pipeline as an athlete, some recommendations you might have for our athletes, and then really how you became a utility player, because you're a pretty interesting player with an interesting history in terms of positions played.
Yes.
So.
Oh yeah. So I did a little bit of everything growing up. I think playing as a young kid, growing up in Rochester, playing for my dad, who was very much in the volleyball community. I just learned how to be a volleyball player very young. I wasn't stuck in one position, right? And I think that just helped me learn different concepts as a volleyball player as I was growing up in the club world, as I got into high school. And then it opened me up to different roles, not only in the USA gym, but at Pepperdine as a serving sub, as a libero, defensive libero, potentially to outside later too. So it was great to have a mix of roles throughout my career. I think something that pushed me on from a very young age was being in the USA gym. I was in my first high performance event in 2011. I was 12 years old. Fun fact was that Kevin Moore, who runs these events now for all the youth, flew with me and brought me to that because my parents couldn't make it. So I got to train in here at Colorado Springs as an 11-year-old, 12-year-old, playing with the Future Select guys, and learned very quickly that, hey, you got to do whatever you can when you have an opportunity like that. So from that point on, I took that with me throughout my development throughout the program, and as a select member, as a youth national team program member, as a collegiate team member, just whatever opportunity came my way, I was going to jump in 100% and take it.
Awesome. I love the openness that you have there. So as you're thinking about athletes that may be entering into the NTDP pipeline, kind of hoping that they can get that opportunity to play in the national team, what are some critical pieces of advice that you would give to them based off of your experience moving through that?
Absolutely. So I think one piece of advice for me or from me is that err on the side of being aggressive. When you have a chance to be here and perform in front of these coaches, right? Err on the side of being too aggressive. You can always be dialed back. You brought back in from the coaches if you're doing too much, if you're communicating too much. I don't think I've ever heard that from a coach, that you're communicating too much. But I think there's a lot of fear in these events. I think there's some stress in playing in front of these coaches. There's stress wearing the name USA on your back. I think there's some negative connotations at times based on how we frame things in our mind as players, right? We don't want to mess up. We don't want to make mistakes. Well, on the flip side, how cool is it that you have an opportunity to play in front of these coaches? How cool is it that you have a chance to wear USA on your back? How cool is it that you get to compete with the other best players in the country, right? So I think, how you frame it is a big piece of it, how you frame the opportunity. There's no reason to fear this incredible opportunity to play with these guys. And then again, err on the side of being aggressive. While you're here, put whatever you can, dive after every ball, right? Go after every serve with 100% confidence, right? Just do the best that you can to maximize your time that you have here. Because for some kids, it might only be 1 or 2 events in the USA gym. Fortunately for me, I had time to develop on a couple different teams and training groups within USA, but just err on the side of being aggressive and leave it out there. You only have a couple hours in front of these coaches, in front of the USA staff. So, get your best shot out there.
I really love that piece of advice because I think it is easy for athletes who come to their first training series event or who move up in that kind of competitive level in front of these coaches who have coached for the national team to be hesitant, to be a little worried about their performance, a little insular. So as you think about your experience in those moments, what helped you focus on being aggressive? What helped you kind of push away the stress that might have been there in terms of performing?
That's a great question. I think something that helped me separately from other people is that I started playing volleyball at a very young age. I was exposed to different concepts at a young age, and I had a good technical base that helped me think about the higher level concepts that coaches were putting in front of me. So that was something that helped me out as a player. If you're focused on the fundamentals when you're back training with your clubs, with your high schools, right? I think that gives you a great base as you start to learn new things from these high level coaches in the USA gym. That was something that helped me, start right away and just get after the new concept that they were talking about. I wasn't a step behind in the fundamentals, when I got to the USA gym. Another piece for me too was trying to get to know the athletes. Being from Rochester, there weren't a ton of people that made it into the pipeline out of Rochester. So it was cool to meet kids from Chicago, Virginia, California, Northern California. It's cool to meet some of the top players from across the country, and building friendships and relationships with those guys, helped me build confidence playing on the court, built trust with them on the court. And it just made me more comfortable as I was competing and putting myself out there, amongst these guys. It's a lot easier to compete if you know the guys around you than if you're trying to just battle with yourself.
Absolutely. So what are some of the keys that helped you establish strong relationships, especially when you're training with these guys for such a short period of time?
Yeah, I think for me, I'm pretty outgoing. I have no problem going up to somebody and saying hello and meeting somebody new. And I think that little step of courage really helped me build relationships early on, especially as a younger kid. I mean, those guys, even though when I was 11 or 12 at my first Future Select event, right, those guys being 13 or 14, that was some of their first time in the USA gym too. So as much as it was my first time and nerves should be there, right, a lot of these experiences are really new for these guys as well around you. So I think going through that and understanding that it's a collective issue that everybody's facing can help you also make relationships and deal with the stress that comes with being a part of this camp.
Yeah, I love that. I love just being honest about what the experience of the camp is like for each other, rather than kind of keeping it internally focused.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes. So as you think about your progression from maybe the NTDP pipeline, the high performance pipeline, into collegiate play, what were some key mental aspects that helped you make that competitive jump?
Yeah, I think one piece of advice that we learned early on, I can't remember if it was from Jonah Karsten, Armin Zakarian, or Ken Shibuya was another guy that was a big impact to me as I was going through the USA program early. The idea of getting incrementally better each day, right? If you can focus on one piece of your technique that you're working on to one skill and get 1% better, right? As you develop as a volleyball player over time, that 1% is going to start to compound, because as you start to train in the beginning of the year, if you're only at 100%, right, each day going forth, right, you start to improve from a further level, right? So eventually, after 50 days of training, theoretically, you're at 150% of what your ability was before, and then 1% better from there, right? You're only going to get that much better over time. So I think breaking it down, going day by day, right, focusing on one thing at a time really helped me to get better as a volleyball player, versus having this big goal in mind and trying to get there versus breaking it down piece by piece.
I really love the wisdom behind that, Spencer, right? I think so many of our young athletes struggle sometimes to think about goal setting and what is realistic or how you break it down. And a big piece of it is it's great to have these ambitious goals to make the national team, to play collegiately, but then you really have to think about, what does that look like on a day-to-day basis? And how do you focus on or isolate certain skills and feel success in that moment?
Yes. Yeah, I think for me specifically, it came down to my effort when I was competing too. I think that was an area that I could excel at. That was a habit that I had built, and that one I had just really enjoyed doing. I wasn't always the best at getting 8 hours of sleep. I wasn't always the best at eating all the right food. But for me, working hard and the 2 hours I had in the gym was a great baseline for trying to build towards that championship standard that was going to help me play in college, hopefully help me make a national team down the line. But that effort piece is really a big piece for me.
So as you think about, you also mentioned this idea of kind of continuously getting better as we were talking about goals, but that really encompasses a growth mindset, right? And that kind of progressive process-oriented focus. So as we think about cultivating a growth mindset while still having these ambitious goals, that is inherently our outcome goals, win the game, make the collegiate team, etc. How do you balance kind of having an outcome focus and having that be part of the reality of our sport, but also having a growth mindset focus for your own development?
Yes, I think this is something I developed probably a little bit later, as when I got, probably more towards when I got to college versus when I was a club player growing up in the USA system. I think I was more results-based focused as a 16, 17-year-old. And, when I had the opportunity to train and try to make the select team and the youth teams and not getting the answers that I wanted and not hearing what I wanted to hear by making the team, I think I didn't respond to failure as well in high school as I did to when I was in college. Learning how to have a growth mindset is huge because you understand that even after you fail, right, there are still opportunities for you to grow, right, and to get better over time. I think not making those teams early on really hurt, but after learning that I could still get better outside of it, I could still train my hardest, I could still communicate at a high level, I could still, build great habits around volleyball and my lifestyle that could help lead me to making a collegiate team in the future, to help me get recruited to go play in college. Understanding over time that that those failures, not being the starter on the select team, not being selected to go travel internationally with the youth team, those failures, weren't end all be all like I saw them in the moment. I think had a profound emotional impact on me and impacted the way that I saw the game going forward for a couple of years because I feared making mistakes. But when I got to college and had the opportunity to work with a couple of different coaches, right, they helped me believe that failure was part of that process, right? And as soon as I didn't see that success in the college gym, right, that helped me. Like seeing failure before helped me respond in a positive way to where I could start focusing on other things, focusing on the things that I can still do well, right? Even though I wasn't playing the best volleyball at the time, I could still be a good teammate. I could still set an example for what I want to do outside, right? In the gym, right? In the kitchen, whatever that might look like. But that transition did not come from me until a little bit later. And that, I think, is the reason why I was eventually invited back into the USA gym and with the collegiate team. There was a new opportunity that opened up as an outside hitter, and it wasn't the path I was looking for, but, kind of jumping back into that opportunity, going 100% with it was a pure result of being process oriented. I think if I stuck to being results oriented, I would have only wanted to be a libero. And although I would have only stuck to being a libero in college, and, I'm not sure if I would have taken the opportunity to be an outside in the collegiate gym, I think that's partially a lie because I think I got to live the little man's dream out anyway, playing outside. But, having that develop over time really helped me out. I wish I had known that earlier, or at least understood it from the coaches earlier as they were talking about it.
I think what you just said, Spencer, is incredibly powerful for athletes to hear because the reality is there's only so many roster spots on these national teams. And so we're more likely to experience the failure of not making the roster, right? And being able to recover from that. So if you could go back to, 17-year-old, 16-year-old Spencer and say, these were the 3 things that I learned from the collegiate coaches that helped me reframe failure, what would you say to yourself?
Ooh, good question. The 3 things that I would say to myself, I would say focus on your strengths. It was one thing that totally helped me out as I got older in college, and hearing from the collegiate coaches. That was Alan Knipe, Andy Reid, David Hunt was also a part of that group. Focusing on your strengths was a big piece of it, just so because it take you back from the other areas. Excuse me. Instead of focusing on why you didn't get a certain opportunity, it could still help you focus on what you can do to get a different opportunity. And having that other opportunity now as an outside to compete in that gym, I think I could focus on my strengths as an attacker. I could focus on my strengths as someone who just played aggressive. I didn't have to worry about my roles as a libero only being a passer, only being a defender, and only being able to impact the game in a couple ways. I think that was also part of my stress, is that when I was struggling in passing, that kind of corroded into my whole identity as a volleyball player, because that my role as a libero was to pass. But as I became an outside hitter, I freed myself up to think about my other strengths as a leader, communicator, someone who played the game aggressively. I think I would also tell myself, you have to understand that failure is a part of that learning process. I think very directly, hearing that as a 16-year-old would have been helpful. I don't think I would have understood what it truly meant. I think I still would have saw failure as something I would want to avoid. But understanding that failure is a part of the growth, and the top athletes in the world face failure more than pretty much all other athletes because they're persistent enough to keep pushing. Right, that's just such a big part of the process. So I think those are 2 things I would really look back and try to tell myself.
Yeah, absolutely love that. So as you've transitioned into coach now,
Yes.
Do you see the game and kind of that pipeline and development of the athletes differently than you did as an athlete, and thus can speak something different into the athletes, like what you just said? You get to be the role player to help them frame failure, or kind of how do you now interpret your role as coach?
I think it's absolutely telling these kids that what I would have told myself 10 years ago. I think helping them understand that failure is a part of the process is such a big piece for their development and right and how they compete in the gym. I think, kids a little bit. I think kids are increasingly becoming more aware of their surroundings in the sense that they're a little bit more worried about what people think of them. They're a little bit more worried about the outcome of how a tryout might go, how this weekend might go. For example, this is some of them, again, their first opportunity to play in the USA gym with some of these guys, right? So I think there's some pressures and expectations they're putting on themselves as a USA athlete. I think the expectation as a USA athlete is to be perfect at times. And I don't think that's necessarily the case. We got to understand very clearly that failure is going to be a part of that process. And this is going to be, a multiple year process if we're going to get to all of our end goals of being on the national team, playing in college, right? This is just a small piece of what hopefully we'll work towards in the end. Another thing too, I'd like to help support a message of taking things a little bit less serious, right? And that doesn't mean necessarily not putting your 100% effort, not being a good teammate, right? Not diving after every ball, right? I think it comes down to how you respond to your own mistakes too, right? Can you laugh it off? Can you look to your teammate and say, hey, it's okay? Can you be the supportive role when your teammates are making mistakes too? I think, trying to find ways to make it a little bit less serious and stressful at times as we're trying to compete and maybe make a team where there's only 12 spots and maybe make a position where there's only one roster traveling on that spot, right? I think if we can make it a little bit more lighthearted, right, and trust the guys around us, I think it could be really helpful.
So Spencer, I think there's a ton of wisdom in what you just said in that idea of not taking your performance too seriously.
Mm-hmm.
And even in that idea that you laid out of saying, hey, the training series and the performance in the training series may not actually even be the goal. The goal is 3 steps further, at a national team competition or a collegiate play or whatever the next level of competition is for these athletes. So making a mistake when you're passing in a drill in the training series, take it a little bit lighter. Realize that failure is part of the process that needs to be there in order to move toward those higher goals.
Yeah, I think something I really want to clear up too is, taking a little bit of the stress off does not mean that you don't train 100%. It does not mean that you don't stay an extra hour in the gym getting extra reps, right? But it has to do with your response to how you fail, right? Are you the one that's getting isolated in your own mind? Are you, hitting a ball away from the court? Are you slapping the ground? Are you turning away from teammates? I think that's when our frustrations start to impact people around us. And, and just looking to your teammate and say, hey, it's going to be okay afterwards, after a mistake can be a huge help to your response and how you might perform on the next skill as well. So,
yeah. Well, and I think there is a lot that goes into what you just said when it comes to building relationships too, right? What a powerful way for a national team development athlete to actually build a relationship with their teammate, to help them shake off and regulate the stress of a mistake on the court.
Yes. I think another thing too, where I would like my role to be with these guys that are coming to the USA gym, I want to help them. I want to help be a facilitator to their experience. I don't want to be seen as the guy that has all the answers, right? I'm not someone that has all the answers. I'm only 25 and, I've been very fortunate to be involved in the USA gym now for a year as a coach and be at a couple of the different NTDP events, as well as be able to be a part of some of the national team rosters with volunteering with the U21 team and helping out with the collegiate team. But I want to be someone that necessarily can be a relaxing presence for these kids as they go through this stressful tryout or camp. I don't want to necessarily be an extremely authoritative figure, right? I'm not the guy that's going to bring down the hammer, but I'm going to be the guy that helps walk you through this tryout. I want to help by giving feedback, right? Very specific feedback in the individual skills that we're working. I want to help build confidence by motivating you, catching you doing it right. I think that's something that also helped me out as a player was when these coaches caught me doing the skills right. But I very much want to be a process of us working together, right? From the side of it, I can help give you feedback, and also you can be a great facilitator of your own growth as well if you're being intentional in the training gym, right? And you're applying the concepts that coaches are talking about. So,
absolutely. So as we wrap up and you think about kind of your whole path, is there any other pieces of wisdom that you would give to our ambitious young athletes as they think about moving to the next level of competition, being a utility player, kind of any of those pieces of your journey that were specific to your journey, but could be applied to?
Yeah, I think it comes down to your willingness to take any opportunity. I think we can look at life as if we're willing to do things or we're not willing to do things. I think we have to figure out what we're not willing to do. And hey, you might not be willing to play libero. You might not be willing to switch to the opposite position. Right. But if you know that, you have to find that out pretty quickly. But I would encourage you, especially with the USA Gym, to be willing to try different things. If a coach asks something different of you or asks something new, whether it's a new way to perform a skill, whether it's a new solution that you haven't thought about as an attacker from the service line, right? Just go with it 100%. Take whatever opportunity comes your way in this gym to just train and show everybody who you are. I think, you have to be a little bit more willing at times to take those opportunities because you never know where they might lead. I think my willingness to play different positions helped me get onto teams further in my career. So I think for other guys, and the flip side of that is that not being willing to take those opportunities, maybe potentially limited opportunity for them to be on other teams as they got older in their career too. So just be willing to try new things, be willing to say that I'm going to just put your best out there and do whatever role the coach needs you.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Spencer. I know the national team athletes and the youth athletes will grow a lot from what you shared today.
Thank you very much. I'm excited to be on. Thanks for having me.